President Trump's crackdown on crime is escalating in Washington, D.C. Some National Guard members are now carrying their service weapons. As CBS News Miami's Natalie Brand reports, it comes as the president signaled a new crime-related executive order this morning.
I don't think that's going to happen.
President Trump is expanding his anti-crime initiative in Washington, D.C., signing an executive order aimed at ending cashless bail, a policy where the court doesn't require some defendants to pay to get out of jail before trial.
That was when the big crime in this country started.
The order threatens federal funding for D.C. and asks the Attorney General to look into other jurisdictions with cashless bail in place.
We're ending it, but we're starting by ending it in D.C., and that we have the right to do through federalization.
This latest move comes as some National Guard troops deployed in the nation's capital are now armed. A spokesman saying the use of force would be solely in response to an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm. D.C. community organizers protested this weekend.
Let D.C. run D.C. The president does not need to get involved in this.
Democratic leaders from across the country are sounding the alarm over the president's talk of expanding the operation to other cities, including Chicago.
The president does not have the constitutional or legal authority to federalize the National Guard here in Illinois.
President Trump has also threatened to send national troops to Baltimore and is clashing on social media with Maryland Governor Wes Moore, a military veteran himself.
As someone who actually deployed overseas and served my country in combat, to ask these men and women to do a job that they're not trained for is just deeply disrespectful.
Several Republican governors are supporting the Trump administration effort, with 6 states sending their National Guard troops to D.C. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
National Guard troops patrolling the nation's capital are now carrying firearms. The majority will carry M17 pistols, their service-issued weapons, according to a Defense Department official, while a small number of the troops will be armed with their service M4 rifles. National Guard troops were seen walking around the city with pistols holstered on their hips and MP patches designating their role as military police. You see them on the screen. On Friday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorized Guard members in D.C. to carry those weapons, and it's a shift from their previously unarmed status. They're authorized to use those weapons for self-protection only. As of Sunday, there were more than 2,000 National Guard soldiers and airmen assigned to D.C., including Guard from Louisiana, Mississippi, Ohio, and other states. Despite the deployment, D.C. police data shows violent crime is down roughly 27% year over year, according to D.C. police data. Meanwhile, new reporting reveals the Pentagon has been planning a military deployment to Chicago for weeks now, as President Trump turns his head towards the next city amid his plans to crack down on crime, homelessness, and undocumented immigration. Officials familiar with the matter tell the Washington Post that the planning involves several options, including mobilizing at least a few thousand members of the National Guard to Chicago as soon as next month. On Friday, Trump touted his ongoing National Guard intervention here in D.C. and zeroed in on Chicago as the next target.
Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent, and we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this, and it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come.
The mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, touted his city's falling crime rate in an interview yesterday and said Trump's threats are unconstitutional and costly.
This president is not taking his role and his responsibility as serious as mayors like myself and across the country are, because we actually have to show up and deliver for people, where he gets to show up and make a mockery out of our democracy. It's unconstitutional, it's illegal, it's costly, and it's not going to drive violence down in our city. The work that we're doing is working. If he's serious, he would work with us.
Our colleague Shaq Brewster doing that interview. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker also weighed in, accusing the president of attempting to manufacture a crisis, in his words, adding that it might be abusing his power. Meanwhile, President Trump is also threatening to send the military into Baltimore to quickly clean up crime there. Trump's threat came in a post on social media yesterday, where he also criticized Maryland's Governor Wes Moore, writing in part, "If Wes Moore needs help like Gavin Newsom did in L.A., I will send in the troops." The president also threatened to pull federal funding for the replacement of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which collapsed in 2024. And he questioned whether Moore, an Army veteran who served in Afghanistan, lied about receiving a Bronze Star. No evidence at all there. Trump's remarks came after Moore said that Trump's comments about fighting crime, quote, come off as so tone deaf and so ignorant. Despite Trump's claims, violent crime is on the decline in Baltimore. Homicides are down 24%, while non-fatal shootings are down 18%.
We are going to look at Union Station. And Union Station is frankly owned by DOT. We are going to take DOT from our partners back under DOT control, and we are going to make the investments to make sure that this station isn't dirty, that we don't have homelessness in Union Station. We want a place where businesses want to obtain leases and set up shop and serve the community of DC, but also the people that travel into DC via train. But also, we want if you're out, you want to go for a great meal, you want to go shopping, you want to come to Union Station because it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's safe, it's a great experience. That's what we want to do for Union Station. So today we're announcing that we're going to take Union Station back under DOT control. Not a power play, we've always had it, but we think that we can manage the property better, bring in more tenants, bring in more revenue, and that revenue is going to allow us to make investments in this beautiful building. It needs investments. It's been, I think, neglected for decades, and it's showing its age. And again, we want to make this place beautiful and the premier train station, not just in America, but the premier train station in the world.
The president is threatening to deploy more troops to other major cities, including Chicago and Baltimore, after his crackdown in the nation's capital. Melissa Dunn has the latest from Washington.
About 2,200 National Guard troops seen patrolling the nation's capital, spotted at train stations and outside national monuments. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says some of those troops are armed.
They're armed, capable of defending themselves and others if need be, supporting law enforcement, and we're proud to be there, sir.
The Guard stationed around tourist attractions and the metro, not in Washington's most high crime areas, according to reports. Police officials say crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low. Despite that, the president is calling the deployment of the National Guard troops a measure to address out-of-control crime in the nation's capital, also saying Chicago desperately needs help. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker urging the president to back down.
This is not about fighting crime. This is about Donald Trump searching for any justification to deploy the military in a blue city, in a blue state, to try and intimidate his political rivals.
Trump is also threatening to send troops to New York and Baltimore, two Democrat-run cities. Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott says his city was starting to see reduction in crime rates before Trump's initiative.
The president could help us all continue to see this work go even further, because none of us are celebrating. We want crime to go down. Again, even further, we want to do it the right way.
ABC's Rachel Scott questioning the president if he would send troops to red states.
You've talked a lot about Democratic-run cities and states. Yeah. Would you also consider sending the National Guard into red states and red cities that are also seeing high crime?
Sure, but there aren't that many of them. If you look at the top 25 cities that for crime, just about every one of those cities is run by Democrats.
Melissa Dunn, ABC News, Los Angeles.
A new CBS News data analysis shows how the deployment of National Guard troops is affecting crime in the nation's capital. According to the data, violent crime is down by almost half when compared to the same nearly 3-week period last year. Assaults are down 19%, burglary is down 48%, and homicide is down 57% from August 7th through August 25th. And for more on this, let's bring in John Kelly. He's CBS News Vice President of Data Journalism and our data guru. John, good to have you on. So break this down for us. Did you find anything surprising or unexpected in your analysis?
Sure. We found a lot of interesting things, Tom. We really wanted to look at what is going on with crime incidents across D.C. in these few weeks since we had these federal troop and law enforcement deployments. And so we're able to look at every incident of crime and its location, and we can see things that are related, we think, to the presence of an extreme amount of additional law enforcement. You know, we're seeing less violent crime incidents reported to the police, at least. Fewer assaults, fewer murders, fewer gun crimes. One of the things that's been plaguing the city with auto thefts down 36%, and so we looked at this time period of these few weeks that there have been these deployments in the city, and we compared that back not just to the same days last year, but we wanted to look over the longer haul too to see if the trend lines held up. And we've seen this decrease is pretty similar. It's a little more than half if you look at the 5-year average. And so there's less at least reported crime going on. Now, that's a complex situation, right? There are a lot of factors that can contribute to that. We can't know for sure how these deployments are affecting that, other than the presence of additional law enforcement and military personnel in, key locations downtown.
John, one of the things I want to talk about, there's a lot of information and some misinformation about the location of where these troops are versus the crime rates there. You looked into that. What did you find?
Well, one thing that's key is that crime incidents are extremely evenly dispersed across Washington, D.C. And a lot of people, everyone comes with their perception of how they feel or what they experience and what they see. But in general, the data over time shows that the crime is pretty evenly dispersed throughout the city. And so there were a lot of talking points around, well, the federal troops and the federal law enforcement officials have been deployed in places that are lower crime areas. And for a couple of these locations on the National Mall, that might be the case, or near monuments. But in general, what we found was that within a half a mile of the confirmed locations for every one of these, incidents, we're seeing in general a higher than average crime rate. And incidents clustered around those locations. These are some of the higher crime low areas in the city. The areas north of the mall and north of downtown are areas that have seen a lot of growth in crime incidents over the past few years. And so those are areas where there had been a lot of criminal activity. And so the deployments, in some place like U Street, have more concentration of crime than you would see in 90% of the neighborhoods across the city.
That's really interesting. John Kelly giving us the data analysis behind the headlines. Such critical work that you do. Thank you for coming on, John.
Thanks, Tom. Good to see you.
This morning, more than 2,200 National Guard troops in the nation's capital now armed. Many seen overnight carrying service-issue pistols, others armed with M4 rifles, all part of what President Trump is calling a crackdown on crime in Washington, D.C. This despite violent crime in the district falling to a 30-year low, down 26% since last year. And now a U.S. official telling ABC News planning is underway to potentially duplicate Trump's mobilization in D.C. and send troops into Chicago. No official deployment has been ordered, and the Department of Defense declined to speculate on future operations. But Trump suggesting just days ago he could expand his focus from D.C. to other Democratic-run cities.
So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York.
A spokesperson for New York Governor Kathy Hochul telling ABC News Trump's attempts to invoke military power undermines work being done in her state that has already brought down crime. And Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker blasting Trump's threat, saying the president is attempting to manufacture a crisis. Chicago's mayor pointing out homicides, shootings, and robberies are all down since last year.
The city of Chicago does not need a military occupation.
The president also setting his sights on another Democratic governor, Maryland's Wes Moore, after Moore touted violence falling in Baltimore and told the president, quote, "If you are not willing to walk our communities, keep our name out of your mouth." Trump lashing out, writing, "If Wes Moore needs help, I will send in the troops," which is being done in nearby D.C. and quickly clean up the crime. But this year, Baltimore is also seeing a double-digit decrease in gun violence, homicides, and shootings. Moore calling the president's threat unconstitutional and a scare tactic.
For a party that talks about state rights, it's amazing how they're having such a big government approach in the way they're conducting public safety.
Now, President Trump has more power over D.C. because it's a federal district than he does anywhere else. In other states, it's the governor that is typically in control of the National Guard. Remember, California is still suing the Trump administration after the president deployed National Guard troops and active duty Marines to Los Angeles this summer. George.
And Jay, the president continuing his purge of high-level military officers.
Yeah, that's exactly right, George. Air Force Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz has been fired as the head of what's called the Defense Intelligence Agency. That's the same agency that drew the president's ire when it compiled an early intelligence assessment that contradicted what the president and other top administration officials had said, that they had, quote, obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities in those 3 bombings in June. The Pentagon not giving a reason as to why Cruz was ousted, but he's just the latest top Pentagon official to be pushed out since President Trump took office, including the former chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown. George.
Jay O'Brien, thanks.
First, it was California, then Washington, D.C., now Chicago and Baltimore. President Donald Trump is offering to send members of the National Guard to Maryland's largest city. It is in response to the governor's invitation to attend a public safety event there next month. ABC's Jay O'Brien has the latest from the White House.
Tonight, President Trump threatening to expand his National Guard surge in Washington, D.C. to include other Democratic-run cities like Baltimore. In a post on social media, Trump, writing Maryland Governor Wes Moore, asked that I walk the streets of Maryland with him. If Wes Moore needs help, I will send the troops, which is being done in nearby D.C., and quickly clean up the crime. Governor Moore previously hailing Baltimore's recent decline in violent crime and telling Trump to keep the city's name, quote, out of your mouth. And responding to the president on CBS's Face the Nation.
The reason that I've asked the president to come and join us is because he seems to enjoy living in this blissful ignorance, these tropes and these 1980 scare tactics.
Days before touting his surge of federal law enforcement and mobilization of nearly 2,000 National Guard troops to Washington, D.C., Trump promising Chicago would be next.
Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. And we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this. And it won't even be tough.
But Chicago police data showing violent crime in the Windy City is down compared to this time last year. At a block party Saturday, Mayor Brandon Johnson responding.
What's being painted by the federal government is false. We love one another. We support one another. We put our arms around one another. We invest in one another because we know that we are our best keepers of one another.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker also pushing back, saying there is no emergency in his state that warrants Trump's federalization of the Illinois National Guard or deployment of active duty troops. Jay O'Brien, ABC News, the White House.
I'm Vicki Libiakis.
And I'm Grant Lotus. President Trump says, yeah, we might send the National Guard to Oakland.
KRON 4's Stephanie Rothman spoke with Oakland City leaders about the possibility of the Guard's help combating crime. She joins us now live from the newsroom with more on that. Stephanie.
Vicki, the president's comments were met with strong pushback from local leaders. They say new data detailing how crime is on the decline shows there's just no need for escalation from the White House. Monday morning, President Trump announced he would be deploying the National Guard in Washington, D.C. to crack down on crime. But it was his later comments about other major cities that he sees as problematic that caught the attention of local leaders.
And then you have, of course, Baltimore and Oakland. We don't even mention that anymore. They're so far gone. We're not going to let it happen. We're not going to lose our cities over this.
The president seems to suggest he'd potentially consider extending the deployment of the National Guard to Oakland. This follows last week's report from the Major Cities Chiefs Association that shows violent crime has significantly decreased in Oakland. In the first 6 months of 2025 compared to 2024, homicides in Oakland were down 21%, assaults down 18%, robbery down 41%, and rape down 24%. Only arson saw an increase up 9% from the same period last year. Oakland Police Chief Lloyd Mitchell praised that progress in a news conference Thursday.
We want people to understand that while we are a major metropolitan city and there's going to be a certain level of crime is going down. People are starting to feel safe.
Mayor Barbara Lee reacting to the president's comments in a statement saying in part, quote, President Trump's characterization of Oakland is wrong and not grounded in facts, but in fear-mongering. We're making real progress on public safety in Oakland, and while we acknowledge we have more work to do, we are doing this work each and every day. Oakland Councilmember Charlene Wong also disapproved of the president's remarks.
The commonality seems to be that they're democratically run rather than the fact that they are cities that have the highest levels of crime, punishing people who did not perhaps vote for him.
Now, Wong also noted that many residents are already fearful due to the National Guard's presence in immigration enforcement, asking the president instead to invest in local law enforcement, which knows the community better, instead of slashing federal funding. Reporting from the newsroom, Stephanie Rothman, KRON 4 News.
Ending his plans to use force to combat crime. A Tennessee city is on his early list of places to send National Guard troops next. On Friday, the president said he might consider taking action to tackle high crime rates in Memphis. But as WSMV4 investigative reporter Stacey Cameron tells us tonight, Trump hasn't shared his thoughts on possibly sending troops to Memphis with Governor Bill Lee.
Well, that's right. When the president was asked Friday if he would consider stepping in to address crime in Memphis, Trump said he was sure that the people there would love it. But turns out the White House hasn't asked Governor Lee if National Guard troops are wanted or needed here in Tennessee. This morning, we caught up with the governor, who said his administration has been working with state and federal agencies like the FBI to target and address crime in Shelby County and Memphis. But the governor said he has not talked with the president about it. In fact, the governor said there were no plans in place to ask for federal help, and right now it isn't needed in Memphis. However, the governor did say that crime in Memphis is a frontline issue, and so he understands why the president is considering using National Guard troops to battle it head on in cities across the country.
So I would not be shocked that he would list any city that has crime, because he is intent on making this country safer than it has been in the past. But we have had no conversations about whether or not the National Guard.
Now, some Democrats, like State Senator London Lamar, who represents Shelby County, are pushing back on the idea, saying more boots on the ground won't fix the crime problem in Memphis. And if structural issues like housing, employment, and food insecurity aren't fixed, Senator Lamar says crime will pop right back up the moment troops leave the city. For WSMV4, I'm investigative reporter Stacey Cameron.
So the line is that I'm a dictator, but I stop crime. So a lot of people say, if that's the case, I'd rather have a dictator. But I'm not a dictator. I just know how to stop crime.